I was born in serene Mediterranean air, full of breeze, nature, beauty of shores. My roots are older than anything I can consciously remember myself, after growing up and living through so much, for I existed and was free long before they even knew how to anchor me through writing. In the Bronze Age, a writing system called Linear A appeared. Then Linear B, the earliest known way of depicting Mycenaean Greek, which itself preceded what we now call Ancient Greek. And as far as scholars can tell, those early inscriptions were mainly records and administrative logs, lists and inventories, not yet literary or poetic compositions as would later emerge. The linear writing system still holds many secrets that scholars haven't fully deciphered. Yet, the very fact that the Greeks later adopted the Phoenician alphabet suggests that linear writing wasn't sufficient for the vast amount of science, philosophy, and literature that Greek thinkers were about to dazzle the world with. I don't remember that stage very clearly because after the fall of the Mycenaean civilization, I fainted for a while, roughly between 1200 and 800 BCE. And I didn't wake up again until I found them reviving me with capsules of Phoenician letters, as if each letter they pressed into me was a pulse returning, a breath of thought flowing back into my veins.
My daughter, the Phoenician language, was active, intelligent, and lively. She even managed to obtain a brilliant invention when she succeeded in classifying sounds into the letters of the alphabet. Some prefer to say she borrowed the idea from earlier languages and developed the alphabet from it. Others say she devised it herself. But either way, I am still proud of her because her name was recorded in history as a turning point in the science of languages. And to be more precise with you, please listen with me to this.
These are the Phoenician letters. Notice the two parts, abajada, ka la ma na. Have you ever wondered about the secret of the order of those four letters, K, L, M, N, in the alphabet? Yes, it's tiny earrings from the Phoenicians' treasure box. Because the Latin alphabet took the letters ready-made from Greek, which was the symbol of knowledge in the ancient world, and the Greek letters are essentially a version of the Phoenician letters with the addition of vowels.
Now, as we saw in the episode on Semitic languages, the Phoenician script was a consonantal system. It recorded only consonants, while vowel sounds were added through various marks. For example, nun, then we add marks, vowels, na, nu, ni, n. Or long vowels, na, nu, ni, and so on. Therefore, a, o, and e were, in the Semitic view, all variations of one root letter, a, changing only by its movement or articulation. But my essence leaned toward a richer range of vocal sounds, subtle distinctions in the articulations of a and frequent consonant blends that appeared naturally in Greek words. So they began to represent their sounds with greater precision, and this became a turning point in the history of writing, the introduction of vowels as full letters. And thus, my speakers, especially the Ionians, as we saw in the previous episode, were ready to step into the Hellenic Age with brilliance. It was an age when scientific inquiry flourished, and I could feel such pride as I watched them explore the depths of knowledge. Meanwhile, I, the Greek language, stood there as the queen of the feast, the star of the scene, dancing all the time between natural science, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, logic, poetry, and myth. Everything one could dream of.
We, my speakers and I, were developing thought and the details of classical Greek life across the serene basin of our lands, with Athens and Sparta as well, standing as our jewel in science, culture, art, and politics. The Hellenic Age begins roughly in the mid-5th century BCE, around 508 BCE, and it's called Hellenic because it represents us, the Greeks, our classical civilization, which expresses our identity alone. We, the descendants of Helon, the primordial ancestor of the Greek peoples. Alexander the Great was the last figure of the Hellenic Age, yet he began expanding those boundaries in an extraordinary way, building a vast empire that stretched from Greece to Egypt, Persia, and India. And here, in 323 BCE, began the magnificent transformation into the Hellenistic period, which you could think of as an experiment in linguistic domination of the world, but this time, mine, just as English is today. My global supremacy would last for over 3 centuries, and Greek culture itself would begin to interact with many peoples and lands beyond Greece. It could be said that the Hellenic Age is the peak of Greek selfhood, politically and culturally, and the Hellenistic Age is the peak of Greek expansion and adaptation to the outer world. But since our spotlight here is on the linguistic aspect, my own growth and development, I should point out that in the Hellenic Age, I used to wander freely among the Greek tribes, each with its own distinct dialect. The difference became clear when Alexander, a Macedonian, conquered the known world. His soldiers and officers came from all over Greece, and they had to speak in a middle form everyone could understand. A blend of dialects, especially Ionic Attic, since it was the language of culture and education. The result was a simplified, relatively unified dialect that began to spread, called Koine, which in Greek means common or shared. And right there began my own radiant experience of global fame in the Hellenistic Age. When Alexander conquered Egypt, the Levant, Persia, and Central Asia, he didn't stop at military rule. He founded new cities like Alexandria, Antioch, Seleucia, Pergamum, and filled them with Greek settlers to live, trade, and teach. So in every region, there emerged a Greek ruling and cultural class, and the official language in administration, education, and commerce became Koine Greek. That means I became the lingua franca, the language of communication among diverse peoples. The Egyptian, the Syrian, the Persian, the Jew, all spoke in Koine, my latest dazzling appearance on the world stage. Alexander didn't spread Greek by force. He created a single cultural world where civilizations blended together. Alexandria, Antioch, Pergamum, all were Hellenistic cities, meaning Greek in spirit and culture, but cosmopolitan in soul.
In the beginning, en archi, not merely a moment in time, but within the very principle from which time itself unfolds. It marks not just place, but logical inclusion. Archi, the first cause, the originating intellect, the logic that stands before being. Archi comes from the verb archo, which means to begin, to lead, or to rule. So archi simultaneously means beginning, origin, or first cause, and also means principle, foundation, or even authority. In Greek philosophy, archi was one of the most fundamental terms. For Thales, Anaximander, Anaximenes, the Milesian philosophers, archi meant the primordial substance, water, apeiron, air, from which everything arises. For Aristotle, archi is the first principle, the unmoved mover, the starting point of existence and logic itself. So, enarchi doesn't just mean in the beginning, a point in time. It can also mean within the first principle, or in the primal cause of all things. That dual reading, temporal and metaphysical,
is exactly what gives ancient Greek its precision and depth. Epoisen, from poieo, meaning to make, to produce, to bring into being. From this root come words like poet, poem, poiesis, which means creative making. Unlike the mechanical Latin creare, poieo implies intentional artistic creation, an act of bringing form into existence through thought or design. It suggests a conscious creative act rather than mere manufacturing. Theos equals God, rooted in theia, meaning sight, vision, or contemplation. Related to words like theater, theakron equals place of seeing. In its etymological sense, theos means the one who sees or the contemplative intellect. So, in the Greek worldview, theos is not merely a personified deity, but the active consciousness that perceives and orders reality. It's both mind and source, nous in Platonic language. Uranos equals heaven, from a root meaning to rise, to lift up, to expand. In Greek cosmology, Uranos referred not only to the visible sky, but to the structured, rational order of the cosmos, the realm of divine law, harmony, and motion. Thus, heaven here means the higher order of existence, not simply the atmosphere. Geitingen, kai tingen. Ge equals earth, root of geology, geometry, geography. It represents the tangible, material, and finite, the plane of change and perception. Hence the phrase uran non kai gen expresses the totality of reality, the immaterial and the material, the cosmic and the terrestrial. The heavens and the earth, the total structure of reality, the immaterial and the material, the ordered and the tangible. See how every word operates on multiple semantic layers, temporal, causal, and ontological?
Didn't we already see in the Semitic episode that Hebrew slept for a long time because of the diaspora? We even called it the sleeping princess. So of course the Jews began speaking the languages of the countries they lived in and stopped speaking Hebrew. And in order to be able to understand the Torah again, the Septuagint translation was written with my letters and my words. Yes, in Koine Greek, and even the Gospel, which had been transmitted orally for about 30 years, although the language of Christ was Aramaic, when they finally decided to write it down, it was written for the first time in Koine Greek, simply because I was the language everyone understood, even in Rome. Just imagine that. Before the Roman Empire split into European, Western, and Byzantine parts, all scientific works were written in the language of science, in me, because science is taken from the scholars. And when Rome was founded, the Romans learned from the available scholars of that time. And those were Greeks, or people who had studied in Greek like the rest of the world. So the language of science remained for a long time Greek itself.
Honestly, when I sit and think back to the days of the Enlightenment, I remember feeling terrified. Yet somehow I knew that my speakers would step up and help me. Deep inside, I felt that I would survive and continue, though I couldn't have imagined the global stature and leading role I hold today. I am almost the language that two people from entirely different tongues reach for when they cannot understand each other. A truly beautiful kind of universality.
That was me in ancient history. But outside the scientific sphere, the official language of the Roman Empire was, of course, Latin. And even when it split in 395 CE, the Byzantine Empire remained officially Latin at first, because all legal and administrative documents were in Latin. But in practice, it was me, Byzantine Greek, who was the language of everyday life, administration, culture, and religion, especially in the 6th and 7th centuries CE. And as time passed, I began to breathe again. People restored their connection with me, and they started writing science, literature, and religious and ecclesiastical texts in Greek. Thus my presence became established as the dominant language of Byzantium. I remained faithful to the peoples who carried me and used me, just as they remained faithful to me. So I absorbed some linguistic features from the surrounding languages, Turkish, Slavic, Italian, and others, and from this blend I received my final garment, modern Greek, emerging around the 19th century with the foundation of the modern Greek state. And now, after all those ages, I can only say that I am deeply grateful. Grateful to every era that carried me, reshaped me, whispered me into poetry, or chanted me in prayer. Each stage of my life, with all its turns and transformations, was a beautiful passage that taught me something new about thought, precision, and the human soul. I am still alive, breathing, growing, and resonating through minds and hearts. Still proud of the fine details, the logical clarity, and the layered meanings that once formed such a solid scientific and cultural foundation through the centuries. I owe everything to those who continue to speak me, protect me, and think through me. They are my guardians and my companions in time. And I am always in awe and endlessly happy to live on in the embrace of this beautiful land, Greece, where the sea still sings my rhythm and the wind still carries the sound of my name.